Good evening. We are here in closed session for City Council. We're in closed session because we're dealing with the contract negotiations involving the animal shelter. And we've had a lot of discussion and public positions on both sides of this topic. I'm Helen Phillips, the Deputy City Attorney. I'm here on behalf of the City Manager, Nicole Basham. And as you know, the City Manager was she had a health problem. She's doing well, but she's had a medical emergency, and I'm just filling in for her tonight. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago where this issue was tabled, and just to bring you up to speed, a little bit of background, and some of this was already presented by the city manager then, is we've had an agreement with Bryant County, the city of Clayton, and the city of Burkesville to for the last 10 years to take care of animals, the stray dogs and cats from the three jurisdictions, as well as adoption and euthanasia services. The contract is about to expire. We have 120 days to renegotiate. And the first meeting to renegotiate with the director of the SPCA, the three jurisdictions offered to freeze their existing cost, which is $92,124 for Burkesville. And that would be for 3 years in exchange for a 10-year contract where there was an escalator based on the consumer price index where the cost would go up for the fourth year through the 10th year. The director wanted to go back to his board and present that. And before the next meeting, Bryant County made us aware that they've contracted with Steger and Associates to come up with a proposal for building an animal control shelter because they wanted a backup plan if we can't negotiate with the SPCA. We'd had the second meeting with the SPCA. We didn't mention this Steger and Associates study because that was up to Bryant County and they didn't. It's their work product. And so the SPCA came back with us. They wanted a 5-year flat fee contract for all three jurisdictions, and the amount they wanted from Burkesville was $160,000 a year for 5 years. Now, at the last city council meeting, City Manager Basham presented that and explained that the $160,000 amount is a 77% increase over what we're currently paying, and also presented that the Steger and Associates proposal would be discussed by the Bryant County Board of Supervisors 2 days later at their meeting. So you decided to table this discussion until we knew what Bryant County did. And they went ahead and unanimously approved this proposal to build an animal shelter. So that's where we are. And also, we do know that Clayton, the city council in Clayton, went ahead at their most recent meeting and they approved the 77% increase. They approved the contract with the SPCA. So that's where this stands now. Now, to kind of go into what, before we give you some options and recommendations, is to kind of review the way the costs came out in the Steger and Associates proposal, because they went with a minimum amount and a size of a facility and a maximum. And the difference between the minimum and maximum has to do with if just the average amount of animals are collected, then there's a minimum and it would be a smaller facility, but we know that there's overflow. And if the facility was built to accommodate all the overflow that we can anticipate, it obviously has to be bigger. So that takes the minimum cost annually from $258,000 to $462,000. And there's also a plan to renovate a existing building in Bryant County, but that would either be close to 800,000 or over 2 million, depending on the maximum and minimum. And if we're going with the minimum, the SPCA is involved because there has to be some sort of accommodation for the overflow. So the theory would be that they would be amenable in some fashion to handling the overflow. So this chart that we've prepared goes along with option one, which the option that is suggested is to fund the minimum shelter size with Bryant County. because they've already chosen to go that route. And they've even said that the other jurisdictions essentially have to fall in line. And there's some rationale for that argument, as upsetting as it may be. And then go to Clayton and see if we can get them to reconsider their decision to go with the SPCA and finally negotiate with the SPCA for the overflow. So it would involve all of the parties, but in a different manner. And the numbers for all three under the Steger and Associates, we've highlighted in red the numbers for Burkesville, but you can see the numbers for the other two jurisdictions above and below that. There's 333 animals anticipated a year that would be collected in Burkesville. That's 26% of the total. And the annual minimum cost is just a little bit over $67,000. And the minimum cost to refurbish the building is $205,400. So even with that and whatever we negotiate with the SPCA, that minimum amount is going to be less than the $160,000 that the SPCA wanted us to agree to. So that's option one. Option two is to go the route that Clayton has gone and try to get Bryant County to go in with the SPCA again and try to work out some sort of deal that's below this 77% increase in cost. The major component of those discussions would obviously be that the SPCA wasn't brought up to speed at the last meeting about that the hope would be that showing them the numbers that we've just shown you about that it's going to cost less to build this facility than it would to give the 77% increase that they're asking for and get them to come down in the number. The agreement we've had with them has worked well for the last 10 years. And the SPCA has a lot of support by citizens in all three of these communities. There's a lot of financial support and a lot of volunteers that are involved with the SPCA. So this takes into consideration their influence and how important that is. We recommend option one because this is a way to balance the need that we have to care for 333 animals in Burkesville with a long-term solution that's going to cost the taxpayers less. So that's the recommendation we have. And if you choose that, the process to go forward, just to recap, is that you would vote tonight to fund the minimum shelter amount with Bryant County. And then we would meet with officials from Clayton and try to encourage them to reassess their position about the contract with the SPCA. And then finally meet with Bryant County officials, the SPCA, and hopefully Clayton to go over some sort of continued, like what does the continued involvement of the SPCA look like? And obviously it would include their overflow that we need so we can just build the minimum facility. But also they've indicated that their board wants them to go more into adoption services and a spay-neuter program. So perhaps we could utilize that without having to reproduce that kind of, having that redundant offering of services in the three communities. Then we would generate an MOU between Clayton, Bryant County, and Burkesville to build and operate this new animal control facility. And there would be an MOU between the SPCA and the three jurisdictions to handle the overflow and any other services that we had agreed for them to provide. And finally, issue a joint press release and explain what we've agreed to and when we expect this new shelter to open. Because I know that you all are really you really desire to try to get it into all this because there's been a lot of discussion and concern about this within the communities and try to put an end to it in a manner where all the parties would still be involved in some way or another. Well, that's all I have. I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.